Hello and welcome to episode 308 of the Total Saints podcast. It's your home for all things Southampton Football Club. A huge thank you, as always, to our TSP Patreon community, because we couldn't make the show each week without your support. And welcome along this week to Mal Calzone, who's joined our Bobby Stokes tier on Patreon. So thanks for your support too. Now, as always, we're live streaming this episode on Facebook, on X, on Twitch, Instagram, and also on YouTube. So do get involved if you're watching along live on Sunday nights. Coming up this week on the podcast, just when you thought you couldn't get any worse, we're dumped out of the FA Cup by Burnley's second team, essentially 1-0 the final score, and maybe a sign of things to come. Who knows? Going to review that game eventually. And it's Bournemouth next in the league, which could be tasty. Going to preview that one for you as well. Plus, the transfer window closed this week, so we'll look at what little business was done. It's going to be a really great episode tonight, I promise. Do stick with us. We'll give it our best. My name is Martin Starke. Joining me this week are Steve Grant, who is the owner of Saints Web. Alfie House is senior Southampton reporter at the Daily Echo. And Glen is writer of the blog League One -10. Now, before we get into the game at the weekend, the big story, the big talking point, getting knocked out of the cup surprised probably nobody. But the manager's comments about Flynn Downs were somewhat unexpected. I don't think we had that on our bingo card for this season. Alfie, we spoke about this last week. So it's not a new story, but it was the language that the manager used in the press conference afterwards. And it kind of blew up a bit about his attitude was not good after Saints had apparently turned down an offer from Ipswich. Were you expecting that yesterday?
Well, I was not expecting the sort of, like you mentioned, explosive language that Ivan has come out with, to say it's a bit of a club problem, and that to say in simple English that he had a bad attitude in the last few days of the window. For a manager to come out and say that, it's one of two things. It's either poor from the manager, or he feels he's been forced to say something. And I gave Glen and Steve a little bit of a heads up that he wasn't particularly happy with not playing at the moment last week. We sort of talked about what Ivan had said after the match at Ipswich, where he was a little bit more sort of ambiguous about it and tried to keep things calm. And I think the club really wanted it to all sort of blow over once the window had shut. And obviously we know there was late interest from Ipswich, who he nearly joined last summer. And that they just hoped that once the window had shut, that everything would get back to normal, and he'd be a squad player again. And clearly that's not been the case, because he's been left out of the squad again. And Ivan has, speaking to Adam Blackmore initially and then to George afterwards, made some pretty big comments. And it's very difficult to sort of see how that relationship becomes sort of welded together again. And to be fair, Ivan Juric has been really honest with us, and that's what makes me think that. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, Flynn Downs is obviously a player who last season was really important, but at the end of the day, he's paid a lot of money to train and to play, and he hasn't necessarily deserved a squad, first team place this season, despite how good he was last year. Behind Leslie and Joe at the moment, for me, is probably fair. So you just want the players to be professional, and he sort of pointed out Cameron Archer as a big professional, Jan Bednarek as a big professional, but he feels he hasn't got that from Flynn, and we don't know the full story, so I'm not going to judge too harshly anybody in the situation. But yeah, it's certainly blown up rather than blow over, and I think they'll be really disappointed with how that's happened. And it worries me a little bit in the sense that obviously we'll get on to Adam Armstrong, who's gone out on loan, which I think is a good move in isolation. But Flynn's one of those players who next season, he's championship reliable. He's ready for the championship. They had what it felt like some of a promotion-ready core. And this sort of last few months of the season threatens to disrupt that quite heavily. And, those few championship guarantee players you have, you kind of want to keep fairly happy and keep on the same page. So it'd be interesting to see where they go from here.
There's quite a bit to unpack, Glenn, because obviously, he was an integral part of the team last year, player of the season, been less than spectacular this year. So has he got the right to kind of come out and chuck his toys out the pram? Or as Alfie says, it's only half the story. We only speak to the manager. We hear from him every week. We don't necessarily hear from the player. So we don't know his side of the story. So it's difficult to judge.
Well, on the face of it, which is all we've got, because we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. On the face of it, whenever he's set foot on the pitch as with Ivan Juric as a manager, he's been terrible. So I think he might have played the 1-0 defeat against West Ham. Might have played in that, but he definitely played. He came on as a sub against Manchester United and was part of the falling apart at the end, and he got called out at the end of that game along with other players, as being, part of the problem at the end of the game. Didn't add energy, didn't up the levels, that sort of thing. He had that weird performance in the first half against Nottingham Forest, where, to all intents and purposes, he was running around trying to get sent off. That was ridiculous, and we haven't seen him since. Now, where those January games? I think Manchester United was January, and I think Forest was January. Where that fitted in with, when this transfer issue happened, I don't really know. So can't really say. I mean, when we signed him, I was kind of hoping he'd be our Roy Keane figure. Do you know what I mean? I mean, for people who are too young who only know Roy Keane as a pundit and a comedian, Roy Keane was an exceptional player in the centre of Manchester United's midfield, and he drove the standards for the club and all the other players. And I was hoping, whilst Flynn is never going to be mentioned in the same breath as Roy Keane, I was hoping he was going to be our version of it and really drive other players forward and be that central midfield player who was everywhere, all action. And it just hasn't happened. And this, whatever's happened is not good, and it's kind of a final nail in that particular coffin that he was going to be this sort of inspirational figure. Because to throw your toys out, no matter how sort of like much he's done it, is not great. But at the moment, as Alfie said, he can't expect to be in the team, just based on what we've seen on the pitch. Joe Aribo deserves to start at the moment. He's the guy who's taken his place, and and obviously Leslie's improved after being sort of frozen out under Russell Martin. So it's hard to make a case for him to be in the team, given the way that we only play really with two central midfielders. So it's a shame, and I hope he gets his head right. Players that we've had, I mean, Jan Bednarek for one, he's had, he had his little thing when he went off to Aston Villa and came back, and there's been a bit of a redemption arc there. So hopefully Flynn can do the same thing, because to be honest, we need him. We needed him at the start of the season, and we need him now to make that step up and become a functioning Premier League footballer. But I mean, I don't know what Jurek gains from coming out publicly with it. I know you get, it's difficult when you get fired questions and it's not in your first language and stuff like that. And he doesn't seem the most, I don't know what's the word. He doesn't seem the most, the kind of guy that's gonna hold back if you ask him a question. He's too honest for his own good. But yeah, there you go. I just hope it sorts itself out.
Well, he did say, Steve, that everything is resolvable. So I kind of wonder, firstly, is this kind of inevitable with the season that we're having, that there's going to be these kind of squabbles and differences of opinion, especially with the manager changing, but also kind of what needs to happen next? Does he need to come out and apologise, or does he just get his head down and try and earn his place back in the team?
I mean, some kind of hybrid of all of those, I imagine. I mean, you can't just, regardless of what you deem your status to be in any particular dressing room, you can't just go throwing your toys out of the pram and expecting to be able to just walk straight back in as if nothing's happened. There has to be some kind of proper dialogue there behind the scenes. And I mean, Jurek, just as you say, has said that it's resolvable. So I mean, maybe Jurek has to lay down the terms of what that is, what that means, whether that's a sort of just a private meeting where he says, "Yeah, sorry, I've been a bit of an idiot the last couple of weeks, but kind of felt there was an opportunity for me and nobody let me explore it." It's like, well, you signed a contract, mate. That was 6 months ago. It's one of those where ultimately having only joined the club 6 months ago on a permanent deal, the weight of things are in the club's favour, I think, where you signed a relatively long-term contract. I mean, the contract was presumably a sizable pay rise on what he was on at West Ham as a sort of young up-and-coming player. So yeah, you're being compensated pretty well. I'm not even convinced Ipswich would pay any more because
No.
they're notoriously not paying particularly high wages for anybody. So
That's the other thing.
it's
They're clearly planning for next season, aren't they? If they're thinking that he's a
well,
great
it's
player to bring in, because
I
they're
mean,
not
I
thinking he
find
can
it
help keep them up.
fascinating. Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating given that. I mean, obviously, Morsey has been the mainstay of that midfield for 3 or 4 years, but has looked like the sort of championship plodder that we all said he was this time last year. Kajust is a step up, but seems to only be able to play an hour, and so maybe you're thinking that Downs would slot in kind of as a bit of a hybrid, really, kind of taking the space of kind of both of those at different points in the game. But I just don't see. Yeah, I mean, I don't see him as at the moment. He's shown nothing to suggest that he's a Premier League midfielder at the moment. In either a formation that was more or less tailor-made for him last season, and this under Russell Martin, and obviously since Juric has come in, the system has evolved pretty rapidly, and it's very, very different now. And I mean, the handful of appearances we've seen from him under the new manager, he's been found wanting, and I just don't think that if you're a player who's been putting those performances in, I don't see how you can. I mean, as much as professional footballers all have this huge degree of self-awareness and self-confidence, and think that they should walk into any professional football team, I just don't see how you can lack such self-awareness to appreciate that. Hang on, I've been a bit crap here. I think it's probably not the wisest to go shouting my mouth off when other players have been performing better. I mean, it's a relatively low bar, and yet he's still not come close to clearing it at the moment. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those, as a player, get your head down and work your way back in. But now the fan base all knows about this as well. I mean, it would have been very easy for the club to have kept the vast majority of this under wraps. But now it's out there. Downs has got some trust in the fan base to win back, as well as amongst his management and teammates.
Yeah, he's either got to apologise, I guess, or wait for Russell Martin to get a new club somewhere and try and take him with him. When's the press conference this week, Alfie? Because I know this is probably going to be question number one.
Yeah, it's not scheduled in yet, but it's usually a Thursday or a Friday, so I'd expect Thursday afternoon.
We might find out a bit more. Bit more then.
But to be fair, what more is there to say on it? I suppose is what Ivan would probably say. I mean, at this point, you've said your piece. You've tried to keep it under wraps for over a week. You didn't call him out at the first opportunity. You clearly felt you've needed to now. That should be all there is to say, really. But I guess it will depend on how Flynn reacts.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some football. It was the Premier League's worst attack facing one of the best defences in Europe. So it was never going to be a glut of goals in the fourth round tie. 1-0 the final score to Burnley. I'll be honest, I didn't go. You didn't really sell it to me last week. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to go to the pub and watch the rugby instead. But I guess out of the cup, at least we can concentrate on beating Derby's record now. It felt a bit, Steve, like the cup might have been a bit of something to look forward to, and maybe we could get a couple of wins under our belt, but we even managed to nose that up.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. I mean, while Burnley made, I think, 8 changes, we still made a few ourselves, and probably a few more than most of us would have expected. So yeah, I mean, we didn't help ourselves. I mean, you go up against a championship defence, albeit one as sort of strong as Burnley's defence has been this season. Why on earth do you go in without a centre forward? I mean, this
they changed 3 of the back 4 as well, didn't they?
The concept of playing a strikerless formation. I think the idea of that is sound when you're playing against a team where you're not expected to have the ball very much, and you're expected to be on the back foot and defending a lot. Or if that defence is going to kind of squeeze the space. But they sat very deep. They didn't give us any space in behind. And they just frustrated us. But that was always going to be the case. I think if you'd said to us, on like a week before, Burnley going to make loads of changes, but we're going to go in without a recognised centre forward, I'd be looking at you and thinking you're mental, because what a championship level defence needs is for attackers to be occupying them, because then that's when there are spaces available for other players, and having effectively a number 10 playing up front basically means that all you're encouraging is that number 10 to drop deeper, and the centre halves have then got nothing to do. They're quite happy just to stand there. You're not working them. There's no real danger for them, and that was just really, really frustrating. Because other parts of the game, I mean, I kind of take issue with Juric saying after the game that he liked a lot of the performance, because actually a lot of the performance was just stodgy and it didn't really go anywhere. But there were moments and some individuals who performed well. I thought Suleiman was decent in patches. Fernandes tried to get things going, but the problem was where he was also playing in that midfield, it was getting a little bit crowded for him. Manning was decent first half. Wellington was excellent again. So I think we've got one there, I think, who's going to be of the required level. I mean, whether we're actually able to keep him in the summer based on the two performances we've seen from him so far is a question for the future. But we'll see how that goes. But yeah, he was promising. Slightly concerned that I don't know whether I mean, maybe Dibling's not fully fit. I mean, certainly not sharp. Obviously, haven't played for 3 or 4 weeks now. But have we possibly rushed him back a little bit? Because he just didn't look fully fit there. I think it was frustrating. He barely got a kick, did he? Really? Let's be honest. On the rare occasions he got on the ball, he was doubled up, which should have opened the space up for somebody else. But nobody quite seemed to have that sort of desire, if you like, to kind of stick their hand up and be the one to make it happen. We created a few sort of half decent chances. Unfortunately, most of them fell to the very left-footed Ryan Manning's right foot, which was unfortunate, and allowed the keeper to make a couple of saves that looked good, but probably didn't know an awful lot about. So that was frustrating that we've just not tested the keeper enough. And then left the door open at the other end, and it's a scrappy goal, isn't it? But
it's not one that they would have conceded, though, is it? That's the
probably
problem.
not. No, it's one that you do tend to concede when everybody's kind of lacking a little bit of confidence in the attacking side of things. So yeah, very disappointed with the way it ended, but I guess if you're looking for any slight crumbs of comfort to come out of it, no extra time, because that would have been absolutely dreadful if we'd have to sit through another half an hour of that. And I guess we get a week off at the start of March, which perhaps gives Juric a couple of weeks to kind of fully get at sort of a system that maybe allows us to be a little bit more creative going forwards, because we have tightened up at the back a little bit, but it has been at the expense of kind of creating those big chances. Really, I mean, I think the combined XG for both teams was less than 2, so it wasn't. It just wasn't open enough, which I think we expected. But given you would like to think that with that added quality, I think if Amo-Ameyaw had started, I mean, the 10 minutes between him coming on and Burnley scoring was the best we looked all afternoon. And suddenly everybody kind of got up, and then you have that sort of kick in the teeth when they go up the other end and score with more or less their first chance in the second half, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, just very, very frustrating, and yeah, another one of those ones where you kind of think you've taken a big step forward, and now can you kick on? No, we can't.
No, and that is a positive that I hadn't thought about. We have now got a weekend in March where there's not going to be a game to ruin the weekend. So, good spot. Glenn, Ivan Juric saying afterwards, I really saw a lot of players playing at a good level. Was he watching a different game to you, maybe?
Absolute bollocks. Next.
We've been there before, haven't we? It's sort of harking back to managers of old, talking about good games and
Nathan Jones. Nathan Jones, I was putting mind off saying that we played well, and if you're stood there and you've got a turd in your hand and you try and tell everyone it's not a turd, everyone knows it's a turd, and and that's basically what his press conference just did my head in. You can't come out having. I mean, we talk about him being honest. He wasn't very honest there, was he? Or if he thinks that's an acceptable performance, then I'm sorry, off you go, mate.
He's not the man, is he?
No, that's not acceptable. That was absolutely dire. I thought the messing around with Wellington, putting him as a centre back, totally unnecessary. There was no need to do that. Ryan Manning could have done that, or he could have played one of the other defenders that he had. You know who. But I thought that was unnecessary. Playing without a striker, I got really annoyed about this when Russell Martin did it at the start of the season. We're not good enough to do that. We're not good enough to play sort of like through the lines. We had this weird tactical nonsense going on in the second half where Aribo would drop into the back three, Wellington would go left, Ugachukwu was in midfield on his own because no one had popped into midfield. I mean, we're playing a formation that only has two in the centre of midfield. So there's got to be two players there because Burnley had three in there. So if Leslie Ugachukwu was marked, we end up playing Russell Martin ball along the back 4, 5, 6, however many's there. And we didn't go anywhere. It was just awful. I mean, when we bought Anu-Achu on, as Steve said, there was kind of 5 or 6 minutes where we looked like we were going to change, but then we stopped going to him. But the most pathetic part of the game was after they'd scored. I think we had, with the extra time, 17 minutes where we put a grand total of 2 balls into the box. One went straight to the goalkeeper and one went out for a goal kick. So what are you doing? 17 minutes to try and rescue a game. And then to come out and say that, he thought that was acceptable. I'm just sorry, I'm not having that at all. That's the kind of thing that just winds fans up, and it just winds people up. Do you think? I mean, I don't know if new director of football chap was watching that. I wonder what he made of it. I just thought it was terrible, and it was, we've got this prospect of Ivan Juric being our manager next season. We've got to go into the championship and win 20 odd games or whatever against teams that are going to play a low block, a lot of them. And if you're going to go about it that cluelessly, then that is severely worrying for me.
There are, I guess, technically just 2 places or so between the teams. So this was going to be a good test, Alfie, and maybe show us what we need to do, perhaps a sign of what's to come. And I kind of came away from seeing the highlights yesterday thinking this is probably a bit worse than we thought, because it should have been a nice, easy afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, Burnley made 8 changes, so it's not even a case of it's 20th in the Premier League versus second in the Championship. It's the Burnley team this time wouldn't necessarily be up there. I mean, obviously there is the factor of they're coming into that game despite all the changes with a lot of confidence. I mean, as Steve said, quite literally on record, one of the best defenses in Europe this season, which is mad. And they continued that while Saints are in the doldrums. They're low on confidence. But that still doesn't excuse it. And Saints should have gone ahead. They had the better of the chances in the first half, and obviously you forget about that because it was so dire when they were chasing the game. Last shot on target in the 47th minute, when you're 1-0 down at home to a Championship team is not great. But there was a couple moments in the first half. I mean, you mentioned Ryan Manning; he should have scored one of them. Tyler Dibling set him up for one of them. I think a bit of space in the box. There's a moment where Kamaldeen had a good drive, and he had Tyler Dibling in so much space to his right, and he just opted to shoot. And it's just that poor decision making. Maybe sort of taking for granted that you're going to get another couple of chances rather than laying it off to the teammate who's definitely going to score from there. So yeah, really poor game. I think Steve and Glenn have both covered everything that there is to say about the game. Really, I don't think there's too much more I can add. There wasn't anything particularly revelationary in the press conference other than the Flynn Down stuff either. So just a real dull day, and a game we knew was going to be bad, but just so much worse than we could have thought. But I do think that at least it's the FA Cup, and they've got a chance next weekend maybe to turn it around.
I do wonder. I assume kind of everybody stopped asking questions about Bella Kotchap now.
Well, I asked a question about him on Friday, and he said, he's one of the team. He's training well. He's playing well. If I think he can play, he'll play. But he said last week, that he sees him as a right centre back, not on the left. So that is, honestly, based on the fact that he's still not played, that might well be the reason.
I did a quick little bit of looking on his Transfermarkt profile this morning, and looked at his number of Premier League appearances is 24. So I wonder whether there is a significant fee due to Botham
25th appearance
when he makes the 25th appearance.
Maybe.
So, but I imagine that it's possibly that there's.
Are we that skin?
Yeah, but contractually, they have to, if he's fit and available, then he has to be kind of under consideration for the first team squad. You can't just completely freeze the guy out. You've got to be kind of looking to integrate him, even if the manager doesn't believe he's good enough or playing well enough in training or whatever to justify a place in the starting 11. He's got to be sort of considered for a place on the bench. And yeah, maybe there's kind of that sort of just covering bases on a contractual basis, which is why he's still on the subs bench, even though we don't have any other centre backs at the moment.
Does he get up and warm up? I can't honestly remember. Does he?
He certainly does the warm ups at half time and stuff.
He warms up constantly. George from Daily Echo said to me, funny, but he reckons that he's the player in Premier League history who is the highest warm up minutes to game minutes ratio. He is constantly on the touchline. He's never on the pitch.
You might have stumbled across something there, Steve. So we would need Bree and Bednarek both to be out, and then we would maybe put your theory to the test.
Maybe we'll see.
And see.
No, it costs a fortune.
It would, yeah. Is there anything else on the game before we do Player of the Week? Just put it to bed, right? Move on.
Yeah. Only 17,000 empty seats again. Slow hand clap to the club for.
We called that last week before, didn't we?
Stupid pricing model. Yeah.
Get the pricing right.
I mean,
get people in.
Yeah. 17,000 empty seats. Well played.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does feel like a sort of free PR hit, doesn't it? That's just not been taken. Just, cheap tickets. Everyone's happy.
Mind you, you say it as if you're going to get youngsters along to watch that game. It was interesting because where I was sat behind the chapel goal, there was what looked like a lads football team sat in the seats sort of like around me. There's about 15 of them, probably about 10 years old. And for the first sort of like half an hour, they were kind of interested in the game and watching what was going on. For the second half, they couldn't have cared less about the game because it was terrible, and they weren't.
That sounds like free tickets to me. That's free tickets to a club, isn't it, or a school, or
you see youngsters leaving the game. I saw one lad. He's probably about 17. He looked like really upset because we've been knocked out the FA Cup, and I'm thinking, get used to it, kid. But I think if more people had turned up to that game, if you'd got a load of first timers in, they wouldn't be coming back.
Yeah,
long term.
I'll tell you what I did notice in the last sort of few minutes. I mean, not noticed it as if it was subtle. Everyone noticed it, but the fact that Bednarek was really the only player sort of commanding everybody forward in that added time, and yet the ball just kept on coming back to him, and sort of St Mary's got louder and louder, and the whistles and the jeers get it forward, and it kept coming back, and that is a team just bereft of confidence, isn't it? For me, they don't see an option other than to play it safely. Yeah, which worries me.
But why don't we change things? Why not put two up front for the last 5 minutes? You're going out. You're going out of the FA Cup. This is the end.
Well, they did have Paul and Cameron up front for the last 10 minutes. To be fair, I think, didn't they?
Yeah, but Cameron was playing on the left.
Played kind of holding midfield for most of it. Yeah, bizarre.
He was out on the left along with 6 other players. It was just bizarre. You had a Rebo over there, you had Wellington over there, Manning over there. It's just nonsense, basically. Good
Well, Joe
performance, though, Ethan.
Aribo won Player of the Week last week, which no surprise actually. Might be a bit tougher to pick somebody this week. Couple of I mean, Wellington maybe. I don't know. Do you want to suggest anybody, Steve?
No, not really.
Not gonna be another week where we just like bin it off and go, actually, no, they're all.
I mean, yeah. I mean, as I say, Wellington was fine. Suleiman was fine for the most part.
I mean, Wellington in the first minute of the game clearing off the line was probably the only really good thing that happened, to be honest.
Well, also his sliding tackle in the centre circle where he cleaned out 2 players, I think, injured himself in the process, which I think launched the counter attack, which is the one that where Dibbling had a shot that was blocked. No, sorry, the one he put into the side netting. So yeah, I mean that was kind of one thing for people to get excited about. But yeah, it was pretty grim fare for all concerned, really.
So if we had to come up with a couple of names, if we go with Wellington, maybe we'll go with that's about it, really. Isn't it?
Maybe.
And any others to add to the list? No,
not from me.
Pick somebody who wasn't playing. Adam Armstrong, player of the week.
Yeah, to be fair. Yeah, definitely.
Better Kochak for the warm-ups. Right, we'll preview the Bournemouth game in just a moment. Just a little YouTube update for you, because I know we've been talking about this each week, and we have continued to grow again this week. When we checked earlier, I think we're now over 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is absolutely crazy. So thank you if you've subscribed and followed the channel this week. If you haven't done it yet, hit the like button if you're watching the stream this evening, because it really helps us. It's really great to see. And if you're listening to the show as an audio podcast, the same applies there as well. If you press that follow button on your podcast app of choice, or maybe leave us a little 5-star review as well, we'd really appreciate that too. It helps us all like just get through it together, if you like. It's back to the Premier League this weekend, and the first of 2 home games in a row. It's Bournemouth up first. Alfie 7th in the league. They've been scoring for fun as well, so this could be an interesting afternoon.
Yeah, I think had we not had that FA Cup game yesterday, we'd maybe be saying, Bournemouth have had 1 or 2 results recently where, they haven't been quite at it, despite a brilliant run for most of the season. We'd say that, they hung in there at Portman Road, and maybe that'll give them a bit of confidence, a bit of a kick. But you feel like that has all been sort of drained now. And I guess it will be interesting to see how sort of Ivan Juric's pressing system comes up against Andoni Iraola's, which is very much in a later stage of its sort of evolution. So there's interest in there. But yeah, I find it very difficult to believe that this is going to be anything other than a defeat. Unfortunately, they look way better than Southampton do. It's second of 3 home games in a row, though, and I said on my final tweet actually from the game yesterday that I think all the FA Cup will be forgotten if they can turn something around and pull off a result against Bournemouth. He's got a job to do there, hasn't he? Because it seems like this time last season, the wheels started to fall off a little bit in the relegation, and you start to hear about sort of relationship breakdowns and players falling out with each other and falling out with the manager. And I think it gets a slippery slope from there. So I am intrigued to see what state the team is as of sort of next Saturday, whether they're still playing for each other, I guess, playing for the manager. We'll soon find out.
They're quick, Glen. They're strong. They work hard. All the things that we've been asking for this season. So it's going to be an interesting match.
Yeah, they're everything that we're not, and everything that we'd like us to be. They're flying, obviously having a ridiculous season. Iraola will be up there for, he should be up there for manager of the season with Nuno from Forest. But Slot will win it. But those 2 should be up there for doing it with less resources. Love the balance that Bournemouth have got in the team, 4-2-3-1, which is, I feel, the best formation to play. Just a bit of everything. They can do that because they've got 2 proper centre backs, Zabani and Hussein, who have both been excellent, can both play and are both strong as well. I watched quite a bit of their game
ludicrously young as well.
Yeah, they're both 21, and I watched part of their game against Newcastle, and we all know Newcastle, physical team, very good team, and those 2 just didn't take a backward step all game. They were absolutely superb. So so Kirkes on the left, who's who's a proper fullback, gets forward, defends, bit of a lunatic, but he's a very good player as well. Midfield balance is good, and they got the three guys up behind the striker who were all good as well. Semenyo, David Brooks is playing at the moment, and Tavernier's come back. They've got good players all over the park, and they've hit that perfect season. It's a bit like us 10 years ago under Ronald Koeman, where they've got the players and they've got the manager, and it's all going in the right direction, and everything's great. And Cliver is the one. He's been scoring goals all over the place, hasn't he? So So I mean, the one weakness, if you want to call it that, they've got is they've been getting lots of injuries. So they're having to play Lewis Cook at right back at the moment. So I mean, if we're looking for something we could go at, then obviously Sulemana will be up against him. So that might be something to look at, but it's slim pickings. They're miles better than us in terms of the way they're managed, the way they set out, the players they've got. David Brooks is in the team at the moment as well, so be interesting to see him come back.
I mean, Glen, you talk about sort of playing with no striker. I mean, they seem to have such a way of doing it, I guess. They haven't got a choice. They haven't got a striker. They're all injured. But they found a way of, with that front three and one more, just finding a way to keep scoring goals.
Yeah, well, is it Dango Atara is the kind of nominated striker now. Evan Nielsen's injured. And he's the one who's up there most of the time, but you will see Semenyo drifting in there as well, and
that's a problem with our rigid man marking.
That's true.
There's going to be a lot of space in that middle.
Yeah, and it does worry me. I mean, Bournemouth were the first team this season to, we were shocking when we went there, and I don't know if you remember the press conference afterwards where Iraola come out with that quote where he basically said, "Well, I'd rather have chances than possession."
Yeah.
And it was a real taking the piss, laughing stock type of thing. And then Semenyo said something along the lines of, "Well, we knew they'd give us a goal," and it was brutal. I mean, it was perfectly valid thing to say, and it was 100% accurate. But
it was regarding the quick free kick, wasn't it? We knew they wouldn't be prepared quickly if we moved off the mark.
Basically, we know they're crap, and they're going to give us something, and they're bang on. So fair play to them. I hope that their fans enjoy it for what it is, because they're going to have a summer of the vultures circling and people trying to pick off the manager, pick off certain players and stuff like that. So they've just got to enjoy it while it lasts. But I'm sure they're going to enjoy visiting St Mary's on next Saturday.
Well, I think I read today that they've gone, is it 7 consecutive away games without defeat in all competitions for the first time since 2016. So I'm pretty sure that that'll be one more at the weekend. We're going to have to be on it, Steve, aren't we, really, if we're going to get so much as a point out of this?
Yeah, we've got to be sharp and alert, and that's one thing we've not been in many games this season. In fairness, last week against Ipswich, we were better as a structure defensively, and it's got to be more of that sort of thing than more of what we saw yesterday, where Burnley had a good chance in the first minute or so, didn't they, where obviously Wellington cleared one off the line, and we were caught cold there, and that's the sort of thing that Bournemouth will certainly look to exploit. I mean, they scored a couple like from kickoff either last season or the year before. So they're them sort of having a plan to deal with sort of a team that isn't quite alert from the kickoff. They're pretty well versed in that sort of thing. So that's something we're going to need to be aware of. Just the pace coming from all angles is mildly terrifying, given our relative lack of it. Kind of in all areas, really. I mean, it's only really Sulemana and Aribo a little bit, I suppose. Maybe Wellington who've got that sort of out and out pace. We're a little bit sluggish, a little bit slow over the yards, and we don't want to be giving them a 20-yard sprint because we ain't winning any of them. So it's got to be quite a compact game. We probably, I'd almost be saying we might need to defend quite deeply against them. But I don't know whether we've kind of got the patience for it. But we'll see. I mean, ordinarily you'd read home game against Bournemouth. Well, okay, you're going to try and win this game. You're going to attack and kind of plan for your players being better than theirs. But Bournemouth at the moment are a very different beast, and they are European. They're a European chasing team, which feels faintly ludicrous to be saying, but
has that surprised you this season?
That is the reality.
Has that surprised you how well they've done?
It's not surprised me based on last season. I think once Iraola got his feet under the table, because obviously a slow start last season when he took over from Gary O'Neill, when you had all of the be careful what you wish for mongers sort of out in force saying, well, look at him, he's not won his first 7 games, and whereas Gary O'Neill's got Wolves beating Man City, and it's I think you can see the progression that they're making. They're very smart in the transfer market. They sold Solanke for big money, and they already had the replacement lined up for 20 million less. And yet that's, I mean, £45 million for a centre forward. That's the going rate for a guy who is going to deliver the goals for you. And we're not competing in the same shops at the moment, and that's the reality of the situation, regardless of size of club, history of club, sort of whether we've been chucking a fiver into buckets in years gone by and all that sort of thing. It's all meaningless now. They're a very good side, and at the moment they're a very well run club. What they will find is the same as we found a few years back, is that as soon as your head bashes against that glass ceiling, you can tumble down pretty quickly. Yeah. And you would expect that. I mean, you can't be 100% sort of successful in the transfer market, and with the PSR regulations as they are, and where the way they're going to change, I think will particularly affect someone like Bournemouth with their capacity of 27 people. You just can't generate the revenue, which is what all the new regulations they're talking about is going to be based on. So Bournemouth are going to be at a huge disadvantage. So that's why it's so important for them to kind of make the most of the situation now, because let's be honest, it won't last.
Steve, they've just made their first multi-club model transfer, haven't they? With a French 21-year-old striker called Junior Kroupi from Lorient, who's meant to be one of the sort of best sort of his age group in Europe, and that's exactly what you want to see from a multi-club model, isn't it? And they're starting to see that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that pans out, because I'm sure I read something about a year or so ago where Lorient fans weren't happy with the that sort of ownership model, because obviously Bournemouth are taking sort of prime position in that structure, and Lorient clearly have lost out here because they're getting 9 million quid for this kid who could be worth 3-4 times that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean these things. I mean, we've obviously got similar with Gustepe, Valenciennes, and we'll see how it bears fruit. I mean, given the way things have gone with Sports Republic, forgive me for being slightly cynical as to how that pans out, but proof of the pudding will be in the eating. We'll see how that goes.
Well, we have, I mean, for the first time in a long time, we have got the chance to get back-to-back wins in the league, and I never thought I'd be saying that. So the entries for the Predictions League are open, by the way, for the patrons that play along. You can find the link in Patreon. I'm going to go around and ask the panel for some predictions. Glenn, you're smiling. I'm going to ask you first. Do you want to pick a number? I'm going 4, by the way. I think I'm going to go 4-0 to Bournemouth.
This is going to be wildly optimistic.
You go for a win.
Predictions from everyone. No, I'm not. We'd won yesterday, and you got 2 wins in a row. I would have turned up at the ground next week with a little bit of optimism that we could have gone into it. But I mean, talk about getting your balloon punctured. Yeah, I mean, yesterday was shocking. So, as it is now, I now expect us to get completely battered, to be honest. As I said, they started the whole laughingstock thing, and I think they will want to batter us if they possibly can. I don't think it will be get to 2-0 and then stand off. I think they'll keep going. They they will be out to batter us. So I'll say 4-1 Bournemouth.
4-1. Okay. Steve.
Oh God. Yeah, I wonder whether, I mean, Bournemouth have obviously had this terrific run for over a long period of time now with a lot of injuries. I mean, you look down their bench in basically all of the last sort of month to 6 weeks, and I don't think any of the numbers are less than 40 something on the squad numbers. They are basically their sub bench is basically their academy. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think we're in that situation where the only thing that can go our way is complacency on Bournemouth's part, and I mean, it's possible. It's possible that they turn up thinking, well, they're just going to roll over for us, and if something clicks for us, then yeah, maybe we can take advantage like we did last week. I'd be very surprised, but kind of going to cling to the hope that we're not going to make a complete embarrassment of it. And I think they'll nick it 2-1.
2-1. Okay, and then Alfie.
I'll drop in the middle and go for a 3-1 for Bournemouth. But I am interested in the point that you made, Glenn and Steve, to be fair, about the fact that the amount of pace they have and the aggression and the energy they have versus in a fluid front four versus that kind of rigid man-marking system. We saw how Ipswich pulled Saints apart a little bit in the first half. I am intrigued to see how that goes. And that's a good point.
Okay, if you're watching live, stick your predictions in the comments. Want to talk about deadline day before we finish. Adam Armstrong leaving for West Brom. That was a bit of a shock, Alfie, or could you see that happening? There were a few clubs earlier in the evening, weren't there? I think Middlesbrough and was Sunderland kind of sort of sniffing around. And
he was never going to Sunderland, surely.
West Brom getting it over the line.
No, couldn't go to Sunderland. There's no way. Well, I mean, to be fair, the Telegraph reported in the morning, didn't they, that he was more likely to leave than Cameron Archer. So I think you're always on sort of alert a little bit. But I got a phone call actually about 10 to 11 that night to say that we put the sheets in, and then I got another phone call about 15 minutes later to say, hang on, they might not have gone in on time. Hold fire. I think for him, in isolation, as I said earlier in the podcast, I think it's a good move. I mean, he's already hit the ground running. He's already scored a goal, just like we knew he would. He wasn't going to play this season. If you look at that front three, I know that they didn't play a striker on the weekend, but you've got sort of Camaldine on the left, Albert Grumbach on the left, Tyler on the right, Matty Fernandez on the right, Paul Onuachu, Cameron Archer up front. So there's sort of two in every position, and he probably wasn't going to get many minutes. And he's obviously come and asked Steve Vann if he could go and take the opportunity, work with the manager Tony Mowbray, who he did really well with at Coventry and Blackburn. So for him, it's a good fit, and he's obviously won his first game. The question mark for me is, does he come back in next season? The obvious thing to say is it's really good minutes for him. He'll score a lot of goals. He'll be fit and firing for next year. But I think Ryan Fraser said in an interview with us a couple of months ago now, usually at this age, if you go out on loan, you don't come back. Now, they've bucked that trend because Jack Stevens and Jan Bednarek both did have, and they've come on to be key players in certain points of the seasons they've been here. But it does feel like it could be a launching point off for him, maybe, depending on if they want to cash in on him in the summer. So we'll have to see what happens. But he's somebody who knows going to score loads of goals in the Championship. So I hope he comes back, whoever the manager is. I think why would you not want a player like him in the Championship? So yeah, we'll see how he gets on.
That's a really good point there, Glenn, isn't it? Does it depend on who the manager is? Because I mean, they've said they want that Juric to stick around. I don't think any of us have seen anything to convince us that he's going to be the person to lead us back. But I guess it depends on the manager and the system, and he'll still be contracted to us in the summer.
Yeah, I mean, I know it also depends on factors like your family, because I know he's got young kids. I think they live in Winchester, and it's a very nice part of the world to live. So, I mean, we all think footballers are inhuman sometimes, and they just do whatever's best for them personally. But I'm sure his wife's going to have a say in where he lives next year, and Black Country or Winchester. Weigh that one up. So I think it will depend on lots of things. Whoever's in charge. And obviously he will score goals. He's as close to a guarantee of goals as you can get at Championship level. But another factor might be he might be thinking, well, if I go back to Southampton and we get promoted again, they're going to bin me off because I've had 3 seasons in the Premier League with them, and it hasn't worked. So he may want to go with a manager who might give him another chance in the Premier League. Because, I mean, let's be honest. If he plays for us, I mean, as a fan, I'm thinking, well, you can't have him as a starting player in the Premier League. I thought that when we went up this year, and you know, we are where we are. So you know, it's a big decision for him, because he's at that age. What's he, 27 now?
Yeah,
he's at that age where he'll want to make this possibly his final sort of move if he does move. I don't know how much longer he's got left on the contract with us, but
well, he signed a new 3-year deal in the summer, didn't he? So a long time.
Yeah, I think all options are open, and it will also come down to how much someone offers us. I mean, if someone offers us, I don't know, 20 million quid, then we might say, oh yeah, well we'd rather have the money.
West Brom ain't going to be finding 20 million quid for a single.
No, of course they're not. But someone else might. If there's a team in the Championship,
new owners. West Brom, I think they just got new ownership, and I think that's why they went on a bit of a splurge in January. Not to say they have 20 million down the sofa, but they've got new ownership with big ideas. So I mean,
if Leeds don't go up, for example, I mean, you would think Leeds will go up, but if they don't go up, that's the sort of player that they'll be looking for. So there might be a team down in the Championship next year who's got a lot of money to spend on a striker.
But then, I mean, Glenn, think about that. I mean, you're going for promotion in the Championship next season, which Saints will hopefully be, and your direct rival has got 15, 16 goals from Adam Armstrong, and they're 2 points ahead of you by the end of the season. You think that's a big error, that's a costly error. So I can't see how you could sanction a move to a rival next season for a player you know is going to bag goals in that league. So I really hope they do a sensible decision and they don't do that.
We've got Ross Stewart kicking around again, haven't we? What was your thoughts on the window, Steve, just before we finish? I know there was a deal for the centre-back that kind of fell through quite late in the evening. It just seemed a bit to me.
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly dull and uninspiring, wasn't it? As I think we probably expected it to be. I mean, as I think Juric himself rightly said after the Ipswich game, it's very difficult to persuade players to come and play for you when you're bottom of the league and you're 10 points from safety. With at that time 1 win all season. So I'm not hugely surprised the way it panned out. I think making sure that we kept all the players we wanted to keep was the principal aim, and I mean, by all accounts, I don't think there was any concrete interest in anybody that we'd have wanted to keep,
apart from
as far as I'm aware. Well, Bednarek to Roma, wasn't it?
Yeah, big offer apparently, according to Ivan Juric.
I mean that's one to probably revisit in the summer, isn't it? You would expect he'll probably be not sticking around for the Championship.
Look, I mean, words are easy, aren't they? They're cheap, but I mean, he said when he signed his new contract in September last year, a long-term contract, that it's a family decision for him to stay here. And again, you mentioned Winchester, and you just have to hope again with Bednarek that still rings true for him. And if he's happy to reject Roma in January, I hope that doesn't change in the summer. He'll be again important next season. But yeah, he said he likes it here and he's happy here, so fingers crossed.
Well, Adam Lallana had similar sentiments about 11, 12 years ago. So let's stick a pin in that one for now, I think.
I suppose the other news this week as well, Alf, is the group technical director finally was confirmed. I mean, we seem to have been talking about this for weeks. It was all to do with work permits in the end. Yeah,
he starts on February the 15th, and as Glenn said, he was in the stadium yesterday. Sat with Mark Bitcon and sat with Rasmus Ankerson as well. Obviously, he will be working alongside Mark Bitcon. He will remain for now director of football operations. He's the Johannes Spoor's the group technical director, and he'll serve under and report into Phil Parsons, the CEO. So the structure there is clear. And I think reading sort of between the lines of what they released as a club, he's clearly focused on recruitment. It's about recruitment, sort of a little bit about pathways between the three clubs. But he's based at Staplewood. He is he's somebody who they want to work on Southampton principally, and he'll be in charge of the recruitment and sort of major football decisions in the summer. So what they have got, let's see how he gets on. He's got a lot of experience in recruitment in Europe, and they've got somebody now who's accountable for what sort of happens on the pitch and for who really is in charge of the direction and sort of makes things clearer. So rather than maybe having everyone sort of chip in with their what they're doing on negotiations and stuff like that. You have somebody who is responsible for that, and that can only be a good thing based on this season.
Finally, he's going to have his work cut out, isn't he? Don't forget, you can follow Total Saints Podcast on all the social media platforms. It's at Total Saints Pod. We've also got a website and there's a merch store. If you want to check out all the merch, it's shop.totalsaints.co.uk. As I mentioned earlier, right at the start, we're also on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with your monthly contribution. You just head to patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. Each of the tiers comes with different perks. There's shout outs at the end of the podcast for all of the patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thank you to Dave Melton, Andy Hollis, Anthony Thompson, Gavin Ford, James Harron, Nicky Nicholson, Southampton NY, Drew Dyer, and James Kibbe. They're all in the Francis Benali tier. And also thanks to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy. Thanks to Phil Cook, Nick Hingston, Nick Reed, Paul Stewart, Phil Horstrup, Matt Hall, Mark Littlewood, Mike Etheridge, James Bobin, John Bevan, and Liam Dempsey. They're all in our Mick Shannon tier. Thank you to Paul Castle Associates and also to Steamtown Brewery for sponsoring TSP this season. Thanks to Steve, Alfie, and Glenn for joining us. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again next Sunday night